If you've been thinking it might be fun to make a quilt, and it will be fun, you may have visited a friend who's a quilter or even gone to the quilting store and seen all the tools out there that are available for quilters. And you're thinking, do I really need all those tools just to make my first quilt? No, you don't. Special quilting tools are about making the process of making a quilt faster and easier. But with all the tools out there, it can just seem overwhelming knowing which ones to use. Let's start by assuming that you're going to make your quilt using your sewing machine. Not hand quilting, not hand piecing, but just using a sewing machine. There are two main parts of making a quilt. The first one is to do the piecing. So that means cutting all the fabric into the little pieces and sewing it together again so it makes a design. And then you get just a top like this. So that's called piecing. The second part of making a quilt is to actually do the quilting stitches. So when you have a quilt, you have the top here. That's the top that you just piece together. And then you have the batting and then the backing. The quilting is the stitches that go through all the layers from front to the back. And you can see quilting stitches on the back here. And those stitches hold the layers together so they don't shift and bunch, and you can wash it in the sewing machine and it won't fall apart. Most of the special tools that you'll see in the store for quilting are for the piecing process. To make a quilt come out like the design that you see on the pattern you've picked out, you need to cut things very accurately and sew them together very accurately. It's just like doing a puzzle, except you're actually cutting the pieces of the puzzle as well as putting them together. First, let's talk about cutting. Cutting tools are, yes, for accuracy, but also for speed, because there's lots of little pieces in a quilt, right? So you want speed and accuracy. You've probably seen cutting tools like this in the store for quilting. This is a rotary cutter. The most common size to use for quilting is 45 millimeters. You can see it says 45 millimeters right here. That's the diameter of the blade. The reason that we use rotary cutters in quilting is because of how fast and accurate they are. Because you're going to be rolling your rotary cutter along the top of your table like this in order to do the cutting, you'll need to have a mat to protect your table. If you did not use a mat, you would definitely cut your table. These cutters are very, very sharp. But also you want to use a special mat like this designed for rotary cutters because these do not damage the blade. So as you're cutting, your blade will stay as sharp as possible and you'll be able to use it longer. These blades do need to be replaced occasionally. I recommend getting a cutting mat that's 18 by 24 inches to start. It's the most convenient to use. And with that, I recommend getting a 12 by 12 ruler because I find that's the easiest to use with this size mat. Sometimes rotary cutter sets come with a very long ruler like this, a narrow thin ruler, which is 6.5 by 24 inches. If you're on a budget and you want to buy one of these sets, you'll be able to do a lot with this 16 by 24 inch ruler. So don't feel that you absolutely have to get a 12 by 12 ruler. If you're wondering why you need all these special tools, why can't you just use your trusty fabric scissors to cut your fabric? Well, again, it's about accuracy and speed. With a ruler and a rotary cutter, you can actually line your ruler up with the edge of the fabric very nicely, and then very quickly cut your pieces. That makes a nice, straight, accurate cut. And remember, we're making puzzle pieces to be sewn together, so accuracy is key. So that's it for cutting the accurate pieces for piecing, a rotary cutter, a ruler, and a mat. Let's move on to sewing accurately. In quilting, you probably want your corners to match like this, right? You don't want them to be way, way off, but we don't need to obsess about it, but you don't want them to be way, way off because then the pattern that you're trying to create on the top with your piecing won't be visible. You'll want to sew nice, accurate seams. Quilting patterns usually specify 1/4 inch seam allowances. That means that the distance between the seam here and the edge of the fabric that's the seam allowance, is exactly a 1/4 inch. And again, this is so that all your pieces fit together. So if you've cut your pieces accurately and then you sew exactly a 1/4 inch away from the edge, then on the front, everything will line up. What kind of tools are there to help you have nice 1/4 inch seams? And again, a 1/4 inch seam just means that that seam allowance, the distance between the stitching and the edge of the fabric, is 1/4 inch. When we're sewing our seams, we're going to want to make sure that the needle is exactly a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric. There are a few different tools that will help. The very first one is just using plain old washi or masking tape. What you do is you set up your ruler so that your needle is going in exactly at the 1/4 inch line. And then you take a piece of tape and just set it against the ruler, just like this. Then as you sew, you just make sure that the edge of your fabric is lined up with the tape edge right there, and you'll have a beautiful 1/4 inch seam. You can also buy magnetic guides that just line up the same way, and then you run your fabric along them the same way. Using a guide for the edge of the fabric, it's really good for beginner sewers because it keeps your eyes back here instead of at the needle. It's much easier to sew straight lines if you're looking back here to guide your fabric. If you're a more experienced sewer, you can get special feet that are designed to help you sew at exactly 1/4 inch seams. So like this one is a more advanced one. It's if you're comfortable with keeping the edge of your foot right along the edge of the fabric there and just sewing along, and that will give you a 1/4 inch seam. There are also sewing machines that have these special guides here that work similarly to that magnetic guide. I just line my fabric up with this guide and it guides it as it goes along so that I can have a nice 1/4 inch seam like that as well. But if you are a beginner sewer, I definitely recommend just using washi tape. You can stick it right there on a line. It'll help you look back here as you're guiding your fabric instead of watching the needle, and it will come off your machine very easily and not leave a residue. You will also need some pins just to do a little bit of pinning as you're doing your piecing. And another really important part of doing nice, accurate piecing is to use an iron. You just need a basic iron. Mine is from Walmart. You don't need a fancy quilter's iron, especially when you're first starting. As a side note, you're probably wondering about the machine. Surely you need some special fancy machine labeled for quilting. No, you don't. You just need a really basic machine. You don't need any fancy stitches or anything like that. You only need just the basic straight stitch that all sewing machines make in order to piece your quilt top. It does help if you have a quality machine, one of the bigger brands, because you'll just have fewer problems, but you just need a regular old machine. Once you've pieced that top, it's time to move on to doing the quilting stitches. Remember, the quilting stitches are what hold the top and the batting and the back all together. Quilting is functional like that it holds all the pieces together so that they make a nice sturdy quilt, but it's also decorative as well. It can add a whole new design element on the front of a quilt. Before you start doing the quilting stitches though, you're going to need to baste the layers together. Basting just means to temporarily hold them so that they don't shift or move while you're doing the quilting stitches. Quilters usually use one of two methods to do this basting of the layers together. One is pin basting and one is spray basting. I cover both these methods in a linked video, but in terms of tools, let's talk about what you need for pin basting first. Pin basting is done with special safety pins. Safety pins because you don't want to be sticking yourself with pins as you're doing the quilting. And what makes them special to use for basting a quilt is that they have this little curve in the bottom. The curve makes it easy to put through all the layers of the quilt. I also recommend, especially if you're doing a large quilt and doing pin basting, to pick up this special tool called a quick clip. It just makes fastening all those safety pins a whole lot faster and easier. The second method is spray basting. It's used by a lot of quilters. There's nothing wrong with it. I just am a little chemically sensitive, so I don't like to have spray baste in my studio. Spray basting is very fast and easy. You just use the special adhesive spray and use special ones designed for quilting so they won't damage your fabric. You spray both sides of the batting, and then you're able to stick the backing on one side of it and the top on the other, and that holds it temporarily while you're doing the quilting stitches. Again, I show both of these methods in detail in my video, How to Baste Your Quilt. Once it's basted, it's time to do the quilting. Even though you've done that basting to hold those layers and keep them from shifting, there's one more special tool that you will want to use to make sure that you don't get tucks and puckers on your quilt. And that is to use a walking foot while you're doing your quilting. I have a whole nother video that talks about why you should use a walking foot to do your quilting, but the basics is a walking foot walks across the layers instead of sliding across the layers. And because of this, it's just like if you were to walk across loose carpet versus slide across loose carpet. If you're sliding across, things are going to get pushed and rippled and cause problems. The layers won't stick together. But if you're walking across them, they won't get disturbed. There's one last thing you'll need to make sure you have when you're doing your quilting, and that is the proper needle. You're going to need a needle that's both strong and sharp so that it can pierce through the layers easily and make nice stitches. I like to use a special quilting needle, especially designed for this, but a jeans needle will also work as well. So that's all the tools that you need in order to make your first quilt. You may have noticed that you already have a lot of them, like an iron and pins and washi tape. The things that are truly a little bit different are that rotary cutter, ruler, and mat, and the walking foot. And perhaps you'll need to pick up a can of spray baste or some basting pins. But really, it's a simple process. If you're really interested in quilting but are hesitating to take the jump, I do have a beginner quilting course. It's linked down below. It takes you step by step through every single part, from buying the fabric, how to negotiate the fabric store, all the way down to how to put the binding on your quilt. And it starts with just a really simple project, a basic table runner, so that you can have success and not have an unfinished project sitting in your closet. I hope this all helps. Thanks for being here.